evening, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. He's got the merch out. Yes. When you said you were just setting up, mate, I didn't realise you were going to spring that on us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Fallout Bar for day 12 of the Paddy Power World Darts Championship. The tournament is well and truly rocking and rolling now. We are halfway through the post-Christmas action for this short section, and then we come back for the final 3 rounds of action. But we do now know our first 2 quarter-finalists, as the last 16 round 3 action was wrapped up and the last 16 action got underway. Dan, happy Christmas. Hope you had a great one, mate. First time I've seen and spoke to you since then. How are we?
Very good, mate. Yeah, great. Brilliant Christmas. Like really, really good all round. We've had this absolutely fantastic Christmas. Kids absolutely loved it. We've had this beautiful little period between Christmas and New Year where we've sort of spent loads of time with friends and family, watched loads of darts. Really good. And then we're off for New Year celebrations over the coming days. Obviously, we're into the business end of this year's tournament. The 4th round is underway. We've got our first quarter finalists, and it's all just starting to get a little bit exciting, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, there's been plenty said by the players at the moment as well. This is the bit where they start playing that war of words a little bit more. We start hearing from the same players that little bit more frequently. They all just put the feelers out in the opening couple of rounds. Don't want to say too much, but now they know the target's on them no matter what. So they're going to come out all guns swinging. That's definitely 2 phrases put together, as we saw in the last 16 this evening, by the way. 2 very one-sided affairs, given the form and the runners and riders in that one. Good evening to everybody in the chat room. Hope you are all well after another excellent day of tungsten action at the Ali Pally. Jackson's a bit flat, but MVG and Doby played well. Gary also did well. I also thought that. I wasn't sure if it was a mix of commentary teams or the matches themselves, but it did feel like the Ali Pally didn't quite get involved as much as they have done over the last couple of nights. We'll talk about that as we go on. Preston's in. He says Doby keeps this up. He has a great shot at winning. Yeah, we'll go with your corrected one of that quickly before we talk about that. Hollywood, says HJV. I love the way John McDonald says that one. Bob's in. He says good evening. Preston says evening all. Connor says, well, lads, to littler shows continue tomorrow. Yes, he does. Nazim Zini says, evening all. MVG look confident, phenomenal. Yeah, I love the way he says that as well. Good evening all, says Joel. Leeds, boing, boing, baggies, all quick tonight. Where did Bunting Smith go? Or no Germans there? Yeah, 4 Germans into the last 32. None of them into the last 16. But we'll leave that to Scott Williams, shall we? Not us. First game of the evening was Damon Heta against Barry Van Peer. And I'll be honest, looking at the day's action, if you told me this was going to be the closest match of the day, I probably wouldn't have believed you that much. Damon Heta has been in fine form. Barry Van Peer, very impressive in seeing off Josh Rock in the previous round. But given the fixtures that were to follow, I wouldn't have pegged this one as the 7-setter if you told me only one of them was going that far. However, the Heat, without a big fiery hat this time, he's just settled for a song. No antics on the walk-on. A 4-3 victor over Barry Van Peer and books his spot in tomorrow's action, Dan.
Yeah, and it was a bit of a strange one, this, because the game did very, very much swing, didn't it? I changed my mind probably 6 or 7 times through the course of it who I thought was going to win. I think at 2-0, when Barry Van Peer went 2-0 up, I did think he would have enough to sort of grind it out at that point. Then Damon came back and won. I think he won the 3rd set 3-0, and I thought, right, he'll kick on. And then I thought, and I swung. And I thought, right, yeah, Damon will just probably going to do 4 on the bounce here. That he'll just come back, lift his level, and away he goes. And then whilst Damon did level it up at 2-all, that 4th set was much, much harder for Damon to claw back. And then it swung both ways. So I just think in the end, Damon, I don't think anyone would argue that Damon is the better dart player. And just managed to find the right level, more often than not in that game. I think that, getting the first set that Damon got on the board was key. I think if that game had a slip to 3-0, then I think, even playing levels that he's got, it's just, there's a maths problem there where people will just hold their darts enough against you to grind that out. But yeah, I think it went the way I think most people thought. There was a big gulf in averages in the match. Now I just think Damon's class got him over the line, really, in what was a tough start.
It was a tough start. And trailing 2-0 to Vampire, who looked meticulous at that point, didn't he? He didn't offer up a lot in those first 2 sets at all. He caught Damon a little bit cold, who hadn't done his usual jumping about or some sort of dance or routine on the walk on. He just got on with it, looked all business, and then finds himself 2 sets down to a player who is only just getting his tour card back for next year. That must have been some shock to Damon, who, do we think there's an argument that perhaps in the early stages he underestimated the threat that Barry Vampire possessed?
I'm not sure he underestimated him. I just think he didn't get going quick enough. And Barry came out, he looked, and I think it's very difficult knowing the problems that Barry's had and the issues that he's faced. I find it, it's very difficult to not root for him, really, isn't it? It is difficult to not root for him when you see him, even in tough spots on there. And I don't think he underestimated. I just think Barry came out a bit fearless and got on with the job quickly. And it took Damon longer to play his way into the match. But once he did, and he did get his, he did reach his level, then he kept it fairly consistency. And in the end, it never really was in doubt too much for Damon towards the end of the match. It didn't get nervy at the end, did it?
No, it didn't in the end. For the Heat, Damon Heta, a word on Barry, because he's set up pretty nicely. He's been in that conversation of the best player in the world without a tour card for the majority of the year now. Now he's going to join the tour card ranks. He had an okay enough Grand Slam. He's had a decent showing here at the World Championships. He's a player that can really make a splash when he comes into the 128 next year, which is remarkable given where he was just a few years ago in that Grand Slam match with Cameron Menzies.
Yeah, it is, and that's why I think it's very difficult to not find yourself rooting for Barry in matches, just because of that journey that he's been on. And yeah, absolutely dangerous. It wouldn't surprise you at all on the floor to see him really do some damage in Pro Tour events next year, playing, because he's going to play 30 Pro Tour events, and it certainly wouldn't surprise you to see him go deep in a few of them. I'd be very surprised not to see him at Minehead next year. I just think over the course of a year on those floor events, he's one of those players that I expect to be at Minehead, even with a first year on the tour.
Yeah, indeed. All right, let's hear then from your winner in this match, man who moves on to the last 16, Damon Heta, in his post-match press conference.
Like, I've been working on a mental game, and it's a positive attitude, and it's positive thoughts and stuff like that. And yeah, it's helped my game 100%. At the end of the day, all I kept thinking was, it's down to me. This is my game. I'm the better player. I'm me. I'm number 10 in the world. I'm this. I'm that. And I kept telling myself. And sure enough, I did not dwell on the bad stuff, and that's how I felt up there. Not hitting the 9 data and winning. Oh yes, I'm taking that to the bank. So yeah, absolute stoked with my performance. And like I said, I've got my wife. We make a great team, and she tells me how it is as well. Not to get ahead of myself, or she always tells me to look back about all the good things that I've done, not the bad things, because there's enough people in the world telling me all the bad things I'm doing, let me tell you.
Good little combo and team that Megan and Damon have proven to be, especially. Look, when you pick your life up, travel around the world in the hope that your partner goes on to make something of themselves in a sport, following in the footsteps of his old schoolmate Kyle Anderson. 10 years to the day since he hit that World Championship 9, by the way. They've handled it pretty well.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I mean, he's in a really interesting section of the draw as well. The Scotty Williams match next is a really interesting one, because, I mean, it could be, we've seen Damon lift his stage presence this year, and we know what Scott Williams brings to the stage. So that could be a real box office event. They both have the potential to play absolutely box office darts as well. But let's be honest, they've both got the potential to stink the place out as well. So, that I think it's a really interesting game because I really have no idea what we might see in that game. I think it's really unpredictable.
No, but there are two players that are going to play at similar pace. They're not quick, they're not slow, but I think it's more noticeable if they are playing bad than perhaps a Doby, a Smith, a Van Gerwen sort of player, because they can't just flick it on, or you're not really. I don't think you get time to realise players are playing terrible when they play quickly because the legs are still over in a reasonable amount of time. But
there will be thinking time.
That extra moment.
There will be some thinking time in that game.
Yeah, 100%. Right, on to the second game of the afternoon. And once again, the story of his tournament so far, to be quite honest, not at his brilliant best. We can say that about much of 2023 about the ferret Johnny Clayton. But once again, he has enough to see off the Polish eagle, Krzysztof Ratajski. This one was all about the fast start from Johnny, wasn't it, Dan?
It was, and I mean, if I'm completely honest with you, I thought it was a bit underwhelming. The match in general. Obviously, Johnny, again, like we said with the first game, got off to a quick 2-0 lead, and then really, even with that 3-0 from Ratajski, Johnny had put that gap in. He put that gap in so early that Ratajski was going to have to lift his game considerably to break those sets and claw that back, and he just wasn't able to reach the level. The averages were all right. They sort of both averaged around the 92, doubling around the 30s for both of them. Yeah, I thought it lacked, as a fan of watching entertaining sport, it lacked a bit of tension, and it lacked real special moments. But like a professional performance from Johnny Clayton, he moves on to the next round, and it's we keep saying, well, he's not playing his best and he's not at his best at the minute, but he's moving through the rounds of a world championship into the fourth round, where lots of people ranked higher than him and in better form than him have already gone out of the tournament. So it's if he just keeps that consistent level, if he keeps averaging 92 and he just pushes himself along, he's got a chance. Again, another interesting game that it sets up between him and Rob Cross in the next round. Lots of people have tipped Rob Cross to come through that quarter. People will probably more favoured to do so in the absence of a certain world number one that we'll come to later in the conversation.
Former world number one, by the way.
Well, yes, former world number one now. Yeah. But is that going to be a sign for someone like a Johnny Clayton, who knows he can turn up to big games on big stages and win? And does that open up the opportunity that, he might fancy that game against Rob Cross, knowing that beyond that he's got a Doby, he's not meeting the defending champion. You don't know what that's going to do psychologically with that, that opening up of the draw.
I guess there's two ways to look at it from Johnny, isn't there? That actually, to get to where he has, playing at the level he has, he'll be absolutely ecstatic. Given his lack of form, he was talking about potentially going to see a counsellor at the start of this tournament because the passing of his father earlier in the year has affected him a lot more than he thought it would, and it's carrying over to darts and the relationship they had with his dad travelling and being his biggest fan, as he says, as a darts player. He does have that freedom knowing that actually it can just click at any moment. He is still a fantastic dart player. He is still ranked inside the top 10 in the world without playing that great for the last 6 months largely. And he can just find the form at the right moment. But actually, he's just found himself in the fourth round of a world championship with absolutely nothing to lose right now. And if you'd offered him that before the tournament, he probably would have snapped your hand off for it as well, given the way that he was approaching the tournament. Like, he's in an absolute win-win situation from here, whereas Rob Cross is been talked about as one of the players to potentially go and lift the Sidwell since before it started. His World Series form earlier in the year and his all-around form has been one of the best players in the world for 2023. And he's playing with that pressure of actually last year he well and truly talked himself out of that Premier League. He's one of the names that's floating around to be back in it again in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, and And it, he's got a really big couple of days ahead of him, hasn't he? And I think that's obviously the next game is key. But if he can get himself up for it, then it could be a really big year, because there are a lot of top players at the minute who are unable to click into some form, and it leaves the door wide open for someone who does. And we know he's got the talent. So we know he's got the ability and he's got the game. And I think he's one of a number hovering around that top end that could just click into something, and the doors could be wide open at the minute, because there's so many real talented players struggling for form.
Yeah, chat room, who said that? Nels, doubles of Johnny, they may haunt him again. They may indeed, but when you look at exceptional performances from Johnny Clayton in the past, he is not the biggest 180 hitter on the planet. He hits tons, he hits 140s, and then when he goes and plays well, he finishes at 50 to 60% on the outer ring. That double 16 might just be there when he needs it tomorrow. And that makes Johnny Clayton an incredibly dangerous prospect to the likes of Rob Cross. However, Krzysztof Ratajski beaten in the third round. The Polish Eagle departs. An average year for Krzysztof, I'd say, not quite living up to the hypes of maybe 3-4 years ago when he was the hipster pick, if you like. Solid enough, not quite produced here. But Johnny Clayton, the man that progresses, and this is what he had to say in his post-match press conference.
100%, because the other night weren't that good. So, no, all jokes aside, I'm up there to try and win a tournament. I don't care how I do it, I just want to win this tournament. Well, it was a little bit better than the last time, but old Johnny's not back yet. There's plenty more room in that tank. So I'm trying to relax, and I'm trying to play my game.
Trying to relax and play his game. We'll wait and see if he can pull that off tomorrow. We'll discuss that in the second half of the show when we make our predictions for the last 16 games. That's not the easiest thing in the world to say. But for now, we do talk about the final game of the afternoon session today. I don't think we're going to say an awful lot about this one. Jim Williams departs. A 4-1 loss to Raymond van Barneveld. Barney averaging just 89 on his way to victory, Dan. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Raymond Barneveld's got away with murder today, and I think he almost said that in his interviews after the match. I think he knows he got away with one. Jim just didn't capitalise on the opportunities that he created for himself, and allowed Barney too many opportunities to come back to the board with very, very little to do. I do recall being in Ilkeston a few weeks ago, and genuinely fantasizing about the prospect, looking at the bracket, that we could see, if the stars aligned, there was a potential meeting where, in this huge Venn diagram of the careers of Raymond van Barneveld and Luke Littler, there is a tiny, tiny pocket of window of opportunity where they might meet on the stage at the Ali Pali. And everyone told me to hold my horses and don't, and it's happening, And I think it's the most fascinating. I just think it's genuinely. I think we know. Everybody expects Luke to go on and do some quite spectacular things in the world of darts, and also Barney is, he is a hero of the sport, 5-time world champion, and I just think the idea that those two get the opportunity to play each other on a competitive stage at the Ali Pali is quite a magnificent and beautiful thing. So I for one, am very, very much looking forward to that match, and I'm pleased that the draw's opened up in such a way. We
are 40 years age difference. Not the biggest age gap we've seen up on that stage. Luke Humphries was 25 when he took on 66-year-old Paul Lim a couple of years ago. Luke Littler was actually born 3 weeks after Raymond van Barneveld beat Phil Taylor in the 2007 World Championship final at the Circus Tavern. Only in darts can you get this sort of matchup. Only in darts can you get these sort of age gaps. Maybe snooker as well. We'll give him that one, given that Jimmy White's still hanging around and he's been around longer than God knows what. However, the actual game itself, Dan, a little bit drab, I'll be honest. Barney pinching the opening couple of sets whilst being way below the performance level that we expected from him. Jim Williams has been solid in this tournament, solid in 2023, to be honest, but this will feel like one that got away from him massively because he just has not performed.
Yeah, and he was nowhere near the Jim Williams that we saw against Peter Wright, even though there's not a huge amount of difference in the average that he posted between the two games. It just wasn't that ability to be clinical and take opportunities. And, I do think Jim created lots of opportunities today and he didn't capitalize. And, Raymond was more than happy to come back to the ball with two dark combinations and away he goes. I think, underwhelming. And Raymond, I think, will feel he's got away with one a bit there and he's had a bit of a gift.
Yeah, 100%. Do we have Barney to play for you? Let me just scroll across. We do. Here is Raymond van Barneveld in his post-match press conference.
Ever playing his A game. Maybe he was afraid. Then Andrew Gilding, who is still the current UK Open champion, he misses doubles. Then Campbell, I was watching the first set. He was missing 2 darts in the first leg. He was missing 2 darts in the third leg. Then 2-1 down. He was missing crucial doubles to get it 2 each. I'm not going to miss doubles tomorrow. I'm a different player than Chris, of course. I know what I can do. I prepare myself for every single match. First of all, I want to say all credit to Luke. I love him. I love the way he's playing, and I will give him lots of respect. To do this in a series, like the Motor Series, to do this everywhere else, but to do this on the highest level and to win 3 games for this crowd, for everyone sitting at home, that gives pressure, right? And I really admire the way he's developing. But sometimes you have to think about yourself. I don't play Luke Littler. Tomorrow I'm going to play the board. I don't care about how good everyone is. I never did to Michael. If they play fantastic, they play fantastic. But I'm not busy with players who are in the top 8 or top 4 in the world. We saw Peter Wright go out. We saw Brendan Dolan's beating Gerwen Price. Everything can happen in the World Championship as long as you believe in yourself and you hit these quality darts and you hit your doubles. So I beat him today, and now you guys standing in front of me hoping me to lose tomorrow. No, but that's a fact. I know this. I know I'm here for many, many, many years in this dart game. We had the Queen of the Palace. Now it's the Prince of the Palace, So I'm hoping to stop your Prince tomorrow, and if not, I will still have an amazing time.
I thought that was quite good.
He's said quite a lot there, to be fair. Yes, we are hoping you lose tomorrow, Raymond. Sorry, but the Luke Littler circus continues. I mean, we'll have to talk about that in a few moments' time. We'll wait until after the next one to talk about Luke, because a certain Mr. Gary Anderson says plenty about the young star as well. I think he's handled himself pretty well there. The one line I want to pick up, Dan, is he says, I won't miss doubles tomorrow.
Well,
my concern for you, Raymond, is the way you played today, you might not get any darts at all.
You might not get a chance to have a go. But the thing that fascinated me the most, right, and because there's a bit late in that interview where Raymond says he doesn't think about his opponent, doesn't think about who he's playing, he plays the board, yet he could tell you what happened in every single leg of every other game that Luke Littler's played in this tournament. He knows how many missed doubles people have made on which leg and who's took out what checkout. So I'm not so sure how much Raymond actually plays his opponent and thinks about them and just wants to play the board. I think that was a really good interview, but my honest opinion, it's the bravado words of a man who's running scared. Is what I think.
I can't lie. Look, he knows he's in for it tomorrow, doesn't he? Like, the crowd have been, as a player who is as well revered in the crowd and gets as much support as he is, tomorrow the crowd are rooting for the underdog in a situation where they just want to see him go and do bits, don't they?
Of course they do. Yeah, and it is. And don't get me wrong, he'll still get his walk on. Like, he'll get, Eye of the Tiger will be great. There'll be some Barney Army. He'll still get that, that big crowd. And I think it's going to be absolutely unreal when he could, for those players coming out. But once that game gets underway, 100% the crowd is going to be fully behind Luca Littler.
They are.
He also, I don't know if you noticed in Barney's interviews on Sky today, was most put out about playing on the afternoon session today. He made a few points on his interview. He came after the game. He came upstairs into the studio with Sky, not the interview he did on the stage. And the point he kept labouring over was the frustration at having to play in the afternoon, and that he hadn't had his 3 meals that day. He'd only had his breakfast, and then he didn't know whether he was playing on the afternoon tomorrow, whether it was going to be the evening session. And he did make it, and I mean, I'm not saying he was already making excuses for a poor performance, because it wasn't a great performance, but I just thought it was an interesting topic to labour upon after he'd won his match, was, that he had to play on an afternoon. So maybe he feels it's beneath him. He's 5-time world champion. So
the most experienced player in the field should be able to handle that and not use that as a consideration. You have been doing this for long enough to be able to know that actually that's going to happen. And actually, maybe that's the sort of moment where somebody who has been in the position of being a favourite, shall we say, for the media and for the television companies over his career is understanding just how tough it is for the rest of the field.
Yeah, 100%. And let's be honest, like the 3 names, and I appreciate there's other names involved in this evening games, but Anderson, Michael van Gerwen, the defending champion Michael Smith, there's your 3 evening games, aren't they? Like, yeah. Who's gonna knock that on the head and go, actually, there's this other, don't forget Raymond, like, he needs to be on there as well. Like, he wasn't in the mix today. I don't think he was in with a shot. But I just found it interesting that he did labour the point a lot in his interview with Sky. I thought it was quite interesting.
He did. On to the final game of the round of, I keep losing track now, 32, the third round. But that was played the first game of this evening's session. The 8-time soft tip world champion Boris Kciuk, hoping to make a little bit of a stir in the steel tip world, has been in great form of late, to be honest. Takes the opening set against the Flying Scotsman Gary Anderson. But from that moment, that just seemed to get Gary going. The man finishes just shy of 100 average in the end. 9 180s for the Flying Scotsman, a 4-1 victory for Gary. Dan, he looked bloody brilliant, didn't he?
Yeah, he looked superb. Big Boris did very little wrong, like very little wrong. His average 95. He was kicking the ass out of 50% on his doubles. Like, that's going to get you through most games. It would have got him through most games today. But he's almost, I think he's probably done the wrong thing coming out and winning that first set, because Gary's come back with his game face on and just hasn't let him off with a thing for the rest of that game. And, whenever Boris missed anything, Gary was there. We know Boris is good on his doubles. But anytime he left Gary a thing, Gary was cleaning it up and just kicked on. And it wasn't competitive, not for the want to try. And as I say, I don't think Boris did a great deal wrong. It was just a case of Boris bumping into one of the greatest players of all time, who's at
his favourite venue on an absolute charge in a season where he's decided he's going to play darts again, pretty much. I mean, the 161 for Boris, pretty special. The double percentage, I mean, he's 7 from 15, 46%, including that 161 on the bullseye, 19 140s for Boris Kciuk, but he just wasn't consistent enough. Gary Anderson, 30 straight tons, 12 140s, 9 maximums, 14 of 33 on the doubles.
And Gary must be a man, who, like, I know that there was a lot spoken about, because I watched the show last night. It was great, about Brendan Dolan beating Gezi Price. But, the 4 people left in that quarter now, Barney, Luca Littler, Brendan Dolan, Gary Anderson. Like, Gary Anderson's going to look at that and think, as long as I can get rid of this kid, I'm all right. Because he's going to fancy it. Again, no disrespect to anything, but no. Gary will fancy that match with Brendan Dolan, and he'd fancy a match with Barney.
You think his record here is ridiculous. We've just put him in a semi-final after that. Like, it says a lot when a 16-year-old debutant in Luke Littler currently looks like he's going to pose the biggest threat to Gary Anderson in winning this quarter of the draw. And he's going to need a very raucous Alexandra Palace on his side to possibly even consider doing that to Gary Anderson. And even then, you've got to get past a man who is just so experienced. He's just going to get on with playing darts because Luke plays at a lovely place for Gary, by the way.
Yeah,
that could be some game. Over an even bigger distance, that would be an increase in 9 sets as well. Look, we're absolutely not writing Barney and Brendan Dolan off here at all. They could well and truly do that, but it is just salivated at the fact that we could see Gary Anderson against Luke Littler in a quarter-final, best of 9 sets, played at a wonderful pace as we return from the New Year's break. All of our interviews are available in full on our YouTube channel, obviously where you are watching this stream right now. We do appreciate you tuning in. Or if you're listening back as an audio-only podcast, you can head over to Online Darts on YouTube to catch up with all of the interviews from all of the players that have won throughout the Paddy Power World Darts Championship. This one in particular, I think, is worth going back and watching in full. We're going to play you a clip from Gary Anderson. I said we weren't going to talk too much about Luke Littler after the Barney segment, despite Barney being his next opponent, because Gary actually mentions Luke a lot in his post-match press conference, and that's who we're going to hear from right now.
Now, see, we're going to say this now because we had another youngster called Josh Rock that all use press and everything else have absolutely destroyed. So if it ever goes tits up with Luke, give yourselves a pat on the back, because that's the way it's going. Let the boy play darts. I've been downstairs today and he's had cameras, Zoom calls, Sky meetings. Let the boy play darts. You know, he's had a great tournament, he's done well. What happens if it all goes Pete Tong now? Well, you boys have ruined that, haven't you? So let the boy play darts. He's 16-year-old, playing well. And yeah, just like Josh Rock, fantastic player, but you've knocked him back about 2-3 years.
You know, what should we do now?
Keep going. Keep having that boy be mic'd up and sitting doing interviews when he should be in the practice board. Carry on. I've seen that 1,000 times. Every year we see a boy coming through the rank. Honestly, you have not got a clue how many young dart players we see coming through the system. Well, this is going to be the next big thing. That's it. Pressure's on him. All goes Pete Tong. Where is he now? We've seen it in the past. You go through the darts over the last 10 years, how many youngsters have come through that he's a boss said this is going to be the next big thing? Where are they?
Now, as a media outlet that we are, sitting here and praising somebody that has sat there and absolutely destroyed media outlets alike feels like a very, very strange thing to do. But I 100% sit there and agree with what Gary has just said. Now, we as a channel have had access to Luke probably more than an awful lot of other outlets. A lot of that has been with a request from his management team or those around him to help him learn and get used to being in front of cameras, knowing that something like this was inevitable. Now, today, something has gone wrong for Luke's camp. He's been photographed with a certain UK newspaper and has been forced to put an apology on Twitter for doing so. Me and Dan have had a conversation about this in a WhatsApp group and have slightly different opinions. So we're not going to tiptoe around it. We have to have a conversation about it. But I 100% agree with Gary Anderson right there. And the way that he's taken to protect somebody who is potentially a game away from costing Gary Anderson an awful lot of money and a shot at a world championship is admirable from a man who looked so done with the sport ever so recently. And all he wanted to do was stick around and cause people trouble, has actually just taken the shield to one of the youngest prospects and gone, no, back off.
No, it's incredibly admirable that he's, and it's very good that Gary is the man to do something like that, because let's be honest, there are very few voices that come out of darts that are taken seriously. Like, people do take Gary Anderson. When Gary Anderson speaks, people do take him seriously. People listen.
If you want a list of players that do numbers on our channel, by the way, from a media insight, Fallon Sherrick and Van Gerwen are always going to do well. The absolute next person, and Phil Taylor, people still want to hear what Phil has to say most of the time, or at least comment. Gary Anderson could sit on our channel for a week long and tell you what he'd had for dinner, and he'd still do as many views as everybody else.
Yeah, and no, people do pay attention, and I think while you and I, we do disagree on certain elements of that, but it's easy to disagree when we actually agree on the most important thing, that is like the primary focus for everybody in that situation should be on what is best for this 16-year-old sporting prodigy. And you and I only don't disagree on the best way to protect him, not the fact that protecting him from all that bollocks should be the absolute priority. I think it's really good of Gary to come out and say. I also think it's good of Gary to not just focus on Luke as well. He does make the point of other players and other. There is an element to which you have to accept in this day and age that large amounts of the revenues that are generated within any given sport come from all the various different reporting streams and social medias and advertising there within. And without that, the revenues of the sport go down. And without the revenues of the sport, when the revenues of the sport going down, if the prize money comes down, like it is all part of this big machine. That does not mean that people shouldn't be conducting themselves with some base levels of morality and ethics. Like that doesn't push that to one side. But there is an element of us all, everyone, involved in sport in any way, having to accept the necessary evils that the money-generating organisations. How many people have ranted and raved about Sky's control within the Premier League, over the PDC? Like it's but again, if you take that money away, you take that revenue away. Well, how are you going to pay all your pro?
There is no payday for the players, and we lose
exactly
exposure to casual dart fans that go to the Premier League once a year. Yeah,
correct. There's loads of stuff that we don't like the way it's done, and we have to accept it as part of the world. But it does not excuse people not carrying themselves with a base level of ethics, and there's a lot about that could be better, an awful lot.
My biggest concern from all of this is that we had a very, very similar situation, albeit not because of age, but because of gender a couple of years ago with Fallon Sherrock. And those in charge in the short space and have made decisions that I haven't agreed with along the way, clearly haven't learned from anything. In the way that they've literally had the perfect case example in Fallon for the last few years on what happens when you get somebody do something exceptional that brings you wider coverage than you're used to for a lot of reasons. Fallon obviously was making the New York Times. Luke is on Sky Sports News, and they're asking about his kebab order, for Christ's sake, because of his age. But there is that special interest to do with something other than just the darts that make him marketable elsewhere, that they haven't gone, right, for the next couple of days, we're going to give certain larger outlets a couple of exclusives, and everybody else will have to report off of that. It seems to be we're going to get every single media opportunity, every single location that we can. Everybody wants a different angle. Everybody's trying something different. And with that, as Gary said, he's clearly missing out on practice at Arsenal last night to relax a little bit. I know he's played mini golf for the family today, and part of that is to get away from it all as well. But there has to be that concern that I just see them making the same mistakes that they made with Fallon a couple of years ago. And they're both under incredibly strong management. They are under some of the strongest managers in the sport in terms of the player management. Like, there's nothing more they can do to protect them apart from just saying no. And then everything dries up. Like you said, you have to accept some of these evils. For me, they need to rein themselves in a bit, because there's more and more decisions being made by the PDC that aren't a governing body, that aren't protecting the players. It's how much money can we generate in such a short space of time, and we don't care about what happens afterwards. There's no long-term protection of players and assets like there should be for people like Luke and Fallon. I think just haven't learned.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be naive enough not to think that, Luke Littler going on BBC Breakfast News is the story. Isn't Luke Littler, is it? The story is watch the Darts World Championships they're on. It's an advert, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I just think if you're going to do that, you have a responsibility to be careful with it. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing specifically. That I thought that one was particularly amusing, but you have a responsibility.
You're going to get those players. You're going to get that, but I just think there need to be capped.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the answer is you put it all through. You just put it all through a PR company. You put it all, or you expand the PR division within the PDC, and you put everything through a PR company, whether that's yourself or somebody else, where they manage everything. So they do one lot of interviews per day, and they share them with everyone, and they pump them out, and they give them, and then you retain a bit of control. You control the questions that are being asked. You control the answers that are going out and being shared. Like me personally, if it was my business, that's exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be making sure everyone's as tight-lipped as they can be, and I'd push them all through my PR company, and I'd choose exactly what was getting shared with who and push it to the world, and I'd charge them all a fee for it. That would be my model. But it does seem a bit of a free-for-all at the moment.
It does indeed. Hopefully, if Luke's success continues, it doesn't get too crazy for the youngster. Right, 2 more games to talk about then, Dan. As we got underway, in the last 16, we found out our first 2 quarterfinalists of the 2024 Paddy Power World Darts Championship. And first up, the man hunting his 4th World Championship title, Michael van Gerwen, absolutely dispatched of one of the most informed men in world darts right now, Stephen Bunting. 4-0 whitewash, exactly the same scoreline as when this pair met at the same stage of the tournament in 2020, just 3.5, 4 years ago, whichever way it works out. Given the way they number world championships, you lose track. First of all, A, what a job from Michael van Gerwen, and B, Stephen Bunting's played the man there, hasn't he? And it's not come out very well.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that Michael van Gerwen's played 3 matches so far in this tournament, and he has not played a mug yet, and he hasn't lost a set yet. Michael van Gerwen's yet to lose a set, and Michael van Gerwen is a player who gets in the habit of winning, and he gets excited by winning, and it does things to him. I think the point he's at now is he's coming into games and he's like furiously angry to lose a set. And he does. I think he's a dangerous man at the minute. He's not doing. He's not. And again, I don't think he quite found his A game today. He still hasn't lost a set, and I'm not sure he's found his A game yet in this tournament. Which again, if he kicks on and carries on moving forward, Stephen Bunting's 50% on his doubles, average 95. Again, that's going to get you through most games. He's going to get you through most first round games. If you can average 95 and do 50% on your doubles, you'll probably get through. But he's met the man, and Michael van Gerwen has done what Michael van Gerwen does. He's done the right things at the right time. He's took his opportunities. He's used the right times in that game to just kick on. He's pinched legs where he needed to, and he's yet to give a set up. The man looks. There was a lot of people on last night's show. I was in the chat room and a lot of people back in Bunting last night, an awful lot of people. And I did back for Michael van Gerwen. I think he's a beast. And it's exactly what we saw today. And he's a terrifying prospect in this tournament.
Terrifying. He is. I just said he hasn't lost a set yet. He's played 11 sets so far. He's dropped just 12 legs in total as he makes his way to the quarterfinal stage. The concern for me here, Dan, is just the way Stephen Bunting has approached this game. We saw a little bit from his interview yesterday, I think it was, if not the day before, and then his pre-match interview pretty much summed it up for me here with the line, if Michael turns up, I'm going home.
I think
that seriously concerns me, because up until this point, Bunting has been the most informed man in the tournament. There should have been absolutely no reason to think that. It should have been, if I don't turn up with my A game, I'm sending him home. And that was the wrong approach for me. And everybody doesn't want to provoke Michael. Nobody wants to give him an excuse to get angry, like Gary Anderson a few years ago, because if Gary gets angry, you're in trouble, sort of thing. No one wants to go poking the bear just in case he produces that sensational performance that is still within Michael van Gerwen, but with a head-to-head record like Bunting has against van Gerwen as well. I think he's massively overthought this, because actually those people in the chat room last night and the backing that Bunting had in the crowd tonight should have been enough with the form he's in to get him over the line, and instead he's he's been nowhere.
Well, to quote the great man himself in recent interviews, he was a bit of a poo pants, wasn't he? I think he saw his ass. I think there was lots of talk, lots of people sort of generally commenting about Stephen Bunting going into this as being laid back. I think he was too laid back. I think he was far, far too laid back. That I don't think he got up. I don't think he believed at any point that he could win, or he certainly didn't look like it. His demeanour on the stage when he came out, I'm not convinced that Stephen Bunting thought he could win this match. And it was an underwhelming performance that made for a bit of a lackluster. I thought this one, I don't know. It had, of the games we had today, I thought, you just never know. It might light up the stage a little bit. And it didn't in terms of a competitive excitement, no tension, just Michael van Gerwen doing what he does and being a bit of a beast, wasn't it?
He is a bit of a beast. I mean, we've been saying all along that this tournament is opening up quite nicely. Scott Williams, or
not if you're in this quarter, it's not
in the quarter final. The rest of it, I mean, this one hasn't really changed an awful lot, has it? But you're looking at beyond that, big names are falling. Luke Humphries is yet to really be that impressive. Scott Williams, Damon Heta, Luke Humphries, Joe Cullen, Daryl Gurney, or Dave Chisnell stand between Michael van Gerwen and a World Championship final spot once again.
Yeah. Well,
I've been steadily impressed with Joe Cullen. He needs to find another gear, though. Luke Humphries' comeback was very, very good. It was very Michael Smith last year vibes, not quite performing as yet, but I worry the mentality is slightly wrong with Luke right now. But of all those players, of all the way that they're playing right now, the form and the way they're going to approach a semi-final of Michael van Gerwen or a quarter-final of Michael van Gerwen, the only one of them for me that is capable of stopping him is Luke Humphries, and Luke's got to find something and fast to do so.
Chat, I think they're all capable of in that section, so that Gurney, Chisnell, Cullen, Humphries, Heta, and Williams, they're all capable of beating him. They've all got a game in them. Those guys, a proper game in them. And if he comes out and averages 100 and does 40% on his doubles, there's every one of those players can do better than that. It's whether or not they can get their bollocks between their hands and do it on the Ali Pali stage against Michael van Gerwen. That, I think, is the biggest thing. There's a comment in the
best of 7 or a best of 9.
Yeah,
best of 9, isn't it? From here.
There's a comment in the chat room about how last year he didn't really have to come up against anything, as he sort of breezed through the rounds. But whitewashed Doby and Dimmy in the quarterfinals and semi-finals. But it's not that they're just crap players. Like, it's not that. It's that they're having to play him on that stage in that situation when he's in beast mode, and that's the problem. There's every player left there that has the game on their day to beat him. It's whether they can get the balls to do it on that stage in that environment, because he's got them, hasn't he? We know he's got that big game energy, that big game performance. It's whether someone else can match it.
It is. Let's hear then from your victor in our penultimate game of the evening, Michael van Gerwen.
100%, because you could see everyone was talking about him throwing 107 average being normal, but 107 average constantly, that's not normal. That's outstanding. That's good. That's brilliant. And then for me to put more will on to him and put the pressure on him constantly, that gives you confidence, and that gives you the joy to do more. And I was able to hit the right score and right finishing on the moments I had to, and that gives you confidence. You're going to play. There was the last game of 2023. Another New Year without the kids and without my wife, and of course that always gets to you a little bit. And it's good you put yourself in that position. Of course, play happy. It's one of them things. It's been a long season so far, but I want to start the new year with a good form, and I give myself that confidence in the last games.
starting the year with a new form, £500,000 better off as well. Don't forget that little bit.
Just to make in the quarterfinals means he said New Year without his wife. 50 grand he's up to so far. Now I'm convinced if I said to Mrs. Simpson, look, 50 grand, but you're gonna have to do New Year without me, my bag would be already packed. You should put it in the car for me.
That's another. You can get matching e-trons at that, mate. Maybe not.
Not quite.
Not quite. Maybe a deposit on one of the charging port on the outside of the house. Final game of the night, and once again, we saw a 4-0 whitewash. But most importantly, the reign is over. Bully boy Michael Smith's reign as the PDC World Champion has come to an end at the hands of Chris Doby in exceptional form once again. Dan, let's be honest, you weren't meant to be on tonight's show. It was meant to be Cam. We'd already had words about Gary Anderson's interview and the reason that he's come out and said it, but you must have been buzzing when you get the chance to talk about Chris Doby to end the night.
Yeah, it was quite special for for those of it, because I was I wasn't convinced going into this. I stuck my predictions in yesterday, and I stuck a Doby win 4-2. I went for. Now let me tell you, I did not put that bet on with the bookies like that. I was happy to say that.
Glenn's last season on tour, where you backed him to win a pro tour every week, and he since 2019.
I'm happy to say it in the chat room, but I was a bit concerned going into this just because, and even at sort of 2-0 up, I was, in the WhatsApp group was texting around, and I just thought, well, so my mate texted me at 2-0 up, and he said Doby looks comfortable, and I went, yeah, but it just takes a few legs for Michael Smith to click, and he'll rattle off 6 on the spin. He's that good. He's so good. And it just terrified me because I just kept thinking at any point, Michael Smith can put 10 points on his average. Like he can just start, and it'll all of a sudden, and I kept waiting for it to happen, and waiting for it to happen. And then it didn't cut out again. Michael Smith's averaged 102. Like he's when was the last time someone averaged 102 and got beat 4-0? Like that doesn't happen very often at all.
No.
And it just was from Chris Doby, a genuinely superb performance. Some of his combination finishing was gorgeous. He's gone over 50% on his doubles, 12 from 23, 102.5 average. It's a proper level, and I think it solidifies him. He's tickled himself up the order of merit tonight, up into 15th. Now, and I think, that just into that top 16 is where he finds himself, which is, realistically where we sort of expect him to be. For a longest time, he seemed to be hovering around the 20s. That's where, where we kept seeing him, but I almost thinking of him as a top 16 player, but never seemed to get himself seeded for anything. I think that move up into the top 16 is a really positive one, even if he doesn't go further in this tournament. Better to be there and defend it than to have to try and move into that spot, isn't it? And, we know that when it comes to seeding tournaments and it just puts him on the front foot, doesn't it? Massive win, though. I think his composure was superb. I thought even, the way he came across in his interview, before, after, I do think he's a real class act, Chris. I think he's a great ambassador for the sport. It probably doesn't do as much media as lots of other dart players do now, without outside the Premier League. But yeah, really impressed. Absolutely over the moon. Great. I was jumping all over the living room. Sellish.
Yeah, that move into the top 16 is quite important for him. It sort of elongates his time at the top of the game, because much like Johnny Clayton, a lot of his success so far, unranked tournaments, the Masters, the Premier League, that's where we've seen him really shine. It's very easy for you to find yourself still out of the top 16, top 32, have a bad year, and suddenly find yourself battling to stay back in position. But like I said, that top 16 positioning now, where he's still got the chance to go and add to that and chip away at that, puts him in those big tournaments again for the next year already. And he gets another crack at them, another time where he's settled, where he's not having to go to Pro Tours and fight to get into these majors so he can relax, play better darts there, keep his form up, and it just spirals into something better for him, which is thoroughly deserved. Because let's be honest, there was a couple of years ago where, much like Michael Smith ever going on to win a major title, Chris Doby was in that conversation. He was finding ways to lose on the Pro Tour whilst averaging 104 plus seemingly every single week. And he was developing a reputation for somebody who was losing games where he was playing well on TV. And it was those intricate little moments where it comes down to holding your nerve that Chris didn't have it for the early parts of his career, but he's gone away and found that, and he is reaping the rewards for that. Because set 2 is where this game was won and lost for me. Nice and early, Smith finds a way into a 2-0 lead in set 2. You're thinking, right, he's getting a foot in the door here. This is where it gets level. This is going 7 sets. It's going to be about who can hold it together the longest. They're both over the 104 average mark. We're in for a belter. And then Doby finds the next 3 legs. And you're like, hang on a minute. We've not seen this level from Michael Smith in the tournament so far. We've seen Doby produce it against Ross Smith, who is capable of scoring at exactly the same level that Michael Smith is capable of scoring at. And he didn't wilt. And it doesn't look like Michael Smith's going to be able to respond.
It isn't, but I think what we're seeing from Chris is real consistency in and around that level of game. Like his game against, so he's played 3 matches so far. He averaged 103 against William O'Connor. He's averaged, what's the average against Ross Smith? 103 against Ross Smith. And he's averaged 102 tonight against Michael Smith. He's played 3 games. His worst average is 102. Like, that's monster. That is monster. That must be. It's got to be he must have the tournament leading mean average. It's got to be. It's got to be the highest mean average in the tournament. I don't think there's anyone that comes really too close to it. Mean average of 92.7 or something like that off the top of my head. Proper form, that proper form. And again, his next game is going to be winnable on that form. If he could, no disrespect to the 2 players, it's Cross or Clayton, isn't it? But that is a winnable match on that form. If he averages 102.5 again, he's got a good chance there.
Well, of course it has. Cross was edgy against Tricol, very good against Jeffrey de Graaf, but found a way to lose 2 sets when he played the best darts he played in the entire match in those 2 sets. And Johnny Clayton has been below his best 88 average, 91 average to get past Steve Lennon and Christoph Ratajski. Poses a threat, but actually over that distance with that scoring power, Chris Doby is going to give himself chances regardless against one of those 2 players. We do have Chris's post-match press conference to play for you. We'll do that first, and then there's a point in the chat room which I sort of have touched on Twitter, so we might as well do that before we look ahead to tomorrow.
Yeah, obviously I had a tough quarter, tough half. They're all great lads and very, very good dart players, and I've been pushed in every single one of my games. Even if the scoreline doesn't give Mike justice, it definitely shouldn't have been 4-0. I stole a couple of sets. Definitely the one way went 2-0 up. But yeah, that's darts. You win some games like that, you lose some, and he'll come back gunning for me the next time, that's for sure. Won't be daft. Nah, definitely not. There's so many good. Look at Luke Humphries, the last 3 majors. He's got to be the favourite by an absolute mile. I shouldn't even be in. Just let me go under the radar, I've told you. I'm just happy to just plod along like I'm doing, and hopefully I'll be there at the final game. The dream's to take it to the Stadium of Light on the 6th of January. But I don't think they'll let us do that. But no, it's massive for me. If I can keep performing the way I am, there's no reason why I can't lift that title and take it to St James's.
Oh, imagine that trophy in St James's Park. Brings a tear to my eye just thinking about it.
The first game is that Tyne-Wear derby in the FA Cup 3rd round.
Oh, we couldn't sully that trophy by taking it to that shed.
I'm saying nothing. I'll let you sort that one out. the form he's in right now, given that he takes on Rob Cross, Johnny Clayton, we've spoken a lot about the Premier League over the last few months, especially on the Live Lounge, but we've pretty much got a consensus at Online Darts that 7 spots in the Premier League are now complete, wrapped up, unless the players turn around and say, no, they don't want it. They are Michael Smith, Michael Van Gerwen Price, Luke Humphreys, Nathan Aspinall, Rob Cross, Peter Wright, given what they've done throughout the rest of the season and various world ranking positions. Given the way he's played so far, taking out the world champion and his performance in last year's tournament, plus the absence of challengers that have fallen at the wayside, Danny Noppert, Dirk van Dijvenbode, Johnny Clayton still circling mind, as is Luke Littler. Is Chris Doby the man in number 8 spot as we talk right now?
I think he is after today. I think if Stephen Bunting beats Michael Van Gerwen today, he remains in that conversation, definitely. There's some interesting games tomorrow where people could potentially stake a claim if they're going to go deep. We saw the clamour last year when Gabe Clemens got to the semi-finals. We could see a semi-finalist that no one expects. There's definitely potential in there for a semi-finalist. Nobody expects. Some of them might be a good pick. My view on it. I'd love to see Chris back in the Premier League. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was a brilliant watch. I thought because genuinely, as an impartial view, he made for very, very interesting and exciting games because he got beat averaging 102. Those games were bloody entertaining. They just were.
Bags of 180s, we got drama.
Yeah, they were proper entertaining games. And I think
in a format that was shite, Chris Doby made it fun.
Yeah, and looking at the consistency, as I say, 3 matches in a row, his mean average is 102.7. If he keeps that level, if you just know Chris Doby's going to turn up and average a ton, he's going to be competitive all the time. And yes, he didn't, but again, he's had more success and more learning and more development since that Premier League stint. So is he a more dangerous prospect? No, it's not his first rodeo, is it? If he goes again, it's not first time out in Newcastle with war flags doing the and everything else. And
don't get me started on the flags, Dan. It's 11:30 at night.
But it's I think certainly if he wins his next game, he's staked a claim. I think he's definitely staked a claim because I don't know what other names you're going to start pulling out that, where you could really make that argument that they're a better. And I'm still not convinced that, I know
I think there's a couple there, but it's a long right? First of all, a couple in the chat room. Is Snake Spite spot really locked up? But still, though, Wright isn't locked in. There's 2 events in Scotland, right? There's only one way that Peter Wright does not play, or 2 ways that Peter Wright does not play in the Premier League. 1, he turns it down. Now, there's absolutely no way Joe allows him to not play if he's offered it.
Financial suicide.
And 2, Gary Anderson says yes. And then they might dislodge Peter Wright for Gary Anderson. But at that point, Gary's not competing with Chris Doby for a spot. He's competing with Peter Wright for a spot. I think
does Gary have any interest whatsoever?
No. He said it multiple times. Even as world champion, he's going to say no.
Yeah, as far as I know, if you offered Gary double money, he'd say no. He's got no interest in it. It's not.
So at that point, Peter Wright is in. He won the European Championships. He's still in the top 10 in the world, despite having a massive fall off of ranking money from defending the World Championships 2 years ago. Peter Wright is in, and they've got a way to justify it. Anders doesn't want it, but if he was in, he would want it, right?
Here's one.
Therefore, the people that are really competing with Chris Doby right now, I think Rob Cross is in already. 2 World Series titles, a European title, been one of the most informed players in the world, made it to the Grand Slam final and the Masters final as well. Rob Cross is in for me, which means Johnny Clayton would have to beat Rob Cross and Doby, and that Doby-Clayton quarterfinal might then become a straight shootout. Or Luke Littler goes all the way.
What about, and I genuinely, what if Damon Heta, who's in the top 10, finds a way to knock out Michael van Gerwen, does he move himself into the conversation?
I think so. Certainly. And look, Joe Cullen, look, if any of these are surprise finalists in terms of Heta, Cullen, Gurney or Chisnall, they certainly jump straight into the conversation. It's whether or not one event is enough.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I do think if you are the PDC, they've they've had this conversation about Luke previously, that they clearly do consider. I know we talked about it earlier on about Luke Littler, the player welfare, and that was
this is the only competition where I give them their props and go, nope, we've seen it. It's a different animal. It's got the ability to ruin people. Bunting, when he first came over, Yellow was in there the first time. Dave Chisnall's run in there was abysmal. Who else was in there that just definitely wasn't ready for it?
Those are after he won it.
Those are maybe Dimitri. I can't think. There was one earlier than Kim and Yella, and I'm trying to think who it was.
Webby?
Potentially. When his action started to fall apart, but there was an argument that he was still on the best.
I can't. I've got nothing in front of me. I can't. I seem to remember Webby having a bit of a mare for at least one stint, but I can't remember how sustained that was. And therefore I don't know whether they would pull the trigger on a Heta or having not, if he hasn't won a major, if he hasn't, and before he's won that big ticket, that big one. Chisnall, perhaps, if Chisnall makes a final, because I think they'd have more confidence in Chisnall, being able to go along with the travelling circus, and not be affected or ruined by it, because he's just been there for that bit longer and been around the block a lot more times. But yeah, for me, God, I'd love to see Dubs get back in. But for me, he'll obviously be back in because he'll win, won't he? So once he's a world champion, they can't not let him in, can they?
True. Right, that wraps up all of the reaction from this evening. We do have 6 games to look forward to tomorrow. Chat room, fire your predictions in. Again, we've been talking for well over an hour already, so we're probably not going to read your predictions out, but get involved with each other in the chat room. Let us know. We'll keep an eye out. And then you've got a claim tomorrow night as well. If you get it right, then we can go back and say, yeah, actually, you did say that, rather than keep it to yourself. Right, we start tomorrow night, Dan, with Scott Williams against Damon Heta.
I think this is a genuinely tough game. I think this is a bit, and Damon probably wouldn't thank me for saying this, but I think it's a bit of a coin toss, because I just think you don't know what you're going to get from both players on stage tomorrow. Head or heart? I think it is a Damon Heta win, sudden death. I think it goes all the way to the wire. 4-3, Damon Heta, sudden death victory.
I have been very impressed with Scott Williams in this tournament. This is the Scott Williams I was hoping would have emerged throughout the entire year. When he got his tour card at this tournament last year, he was already guaranteed by the Challenge Tour, of course. But I just think Heta's got it in those key moments right now. He's been pushed. He's come out with it already. And I think we see a slightly better Damon Heta tomorrow. I'm going to say he wins this one 4-2. Second match of the night, Daryl Gurney 2.0, as he was affectionately billed in the start of this tournament. Renewed outlook, quietly going about his business pretty nicely, by the way, at the moment. There's not been too much hype on Super Chin. Takes on Dave Chisnall, who's been below his best for a lot of the tournament so far, Dan.
He has, but he's been very comfortable. 3-1 against Cam Menzies. I think nobody expects him to dispatch Gabe Clemens as comfortably as he did. 4-1 victory. So whilst he hasn't been at his brilliant best, he's been very comfortable. And I thought for large parts of Gurney's game against Ricky Evans, he looked vulnerable. Like he looked like he could be.
Ricky kicked on for a set, he was in trouble.
Yeah, 100%. I think he looked vulnerable. I think the cracks showed in parts. He managed to get through it, which shows a lot. But I just think he really showed that he could be got at. And I think if Chizzy starts to hammer the 180s, he'll just get ahead. So I think it's a Chizzy, and I think it's probably a 3-2.
You just said 3-2.
Sorry, of course it is. Because I'm looking at the old results at the same time. Yeah, 4-2, Chisnell. I'll give him that last set, to win it.
It's late.
He'll go 3-2 up and then get the last one.
I think I'm going to go the other way on this one.
Really? Good on you.
I thought Gurney was very good in beating Steve Beaton. When he needed it in the final 2 sets against Ricky Evans, he produced big moments. And whilst Chisnell doesn't play at the same pace as Ricky Evans, there aren't many in the world that ever will or even consider playing at the same pace as Ricky Evans. I felt like Gurney game managed that yesterday really well. I feel like he took the sting out of the pace of it and slowed it down a bit when he was going for those strolls in the park after he took out a big finish and made him hang around for it.
Up and down the stage.
While he's gone to find Dean Winstanley, who's still jumping around from his 9-darter 15 years ago. And despite him not being the quickest player in the world, I still think Chisnell likes to play in a rhythm. And I think Gurney will take the sting out of that a little bit. And therefore, I'm going to say Gurney beats him 4-2. We wrap up the afternoon session with Rob Cross against Johnny Clayton.
Probably the easiest one for me to pick of the afternoon session. I think Bobby Cross has been great for large parts of the year. Really on form. We haven't seen the best of him in his first couple of games, which means he's got gears and levels with which to go to. I picked him to win the quarter. It's a 4-1 win. Rob Cross.
I agree with pretty much everything, but I'm going to say 4-2. I think we're going to see a battle from Johnny. I don't think he's just going to roll over. But I also think that if it starts going away from him, there's a chance that Cross can just run off with it. Double 16 tomorrow is incredibly key. If that's there for Johnny, we get a game. If it's not, we're in trouble. And he was on tops a lot today. I don't think we talked about that. The fact he was tops 10s and saved by double 5 a lot. He's got to get back in that bottom corner.
Yeah, that's not him at all, is it? It's really odd.
Has to get back in that bottom corner. The evening session starts the same way as it did tonight with Gary Anderson in action, this time taking on the history maker, Brendan Dolan.
Right, I don't know if the joker's in the chat room, but I am not going to use the P word, and I'm not going to say upset or underdog. I'm not. It's not. But I find it really hard to see anything other than a Gary Anderson victory here. And I think it will be slightly more competitive than today's victory, but not too much. So I'm going to go with a 4-2 Gary Anderson.
Yeah, again, look, Brendan was mightily impressive in beating Gerwen Price. He's going to be up against it this time. Gary Anderson is a crowd favourite wherever he goes. The one concern I probably have here for Gary is, again, the pace. Brendan is not the quickest player in the world. Don't get me wrong, he's sped up a lot when he's at the action, but there's still going to be those moments where Gary's itching to get to the hockey. And that's why I'm going to give Dolan 2 sets. I think if the Gary that played tonight turns up, I think the Gary that played tonight wins comfortably. Penultimate game of the night. Regardless of who's playing in anything else, and no matter what standard they produce, all eyes will be on this game. 40 years age gap between the two players. 5-time champion of the world, Raymond van Barneveld. I notice how they dropped the lakeside for some players, and Barney still gets 5, by the way, against the 2-time JDC World Youth Champion and the reigning PDC World Youth Champion, Luke Littler.
Oh, that's good news, by the way, Laura. Thank you for that. I am also. I've been on the internet tonight because I'm ordering myself a special shirt for our Q School stream, which I think you might like, Laura. So, do you know this one, mate? I genuinely, I don't think anybody knows what we're going to see here. Like, and anyone that claims to is just like, they're thinking aloud. Like, But I'm going to go with what I want to see. Because what I want to see is not what we keep seeing in the chat room. I don't want to see Luca Littler win 4-0. Like, I want to see the guy be educated. I want to see him come through something. I want to see him go through something with a 5-time world champion, and it goes to sudden death. Can you imagine that? Yeah, sudden death. 4-3, Luca Littler win.
I'm the opposite of you. The only thing I do not want to see... You know where I'm going with this, don't you? You know exactly where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Is Raymond van Barneveld with a microphone in his hand at the end of the game.
Holding his hand aloft.
Like Stephen Bunting.
No,
this guy
mate,
here hugging him, do that. Like, no.
Somebody needs to immediately get security involved straight away.
Not give Barney a microphone. We were concerned enough about Gilding's hugging exploits unwantedly when he beats somebody. Let's not give Barney a microphone. It could be a disaster. I think Luke wins 4-1. I'll be completely honest. I expect Barney to not use dark arts, but he'll use plenty of experience. He'll battle away. He said in his press conference he's not going to miss doubles. I think the concern is getting to the doubles. Luke has been... He's rode his luck at times in this tournament. You have to. Players have missed doubles in sets, but there's pretty much every player in the tournament that has faced a set dart or a leg or a dart double that would turn the set that doesn't quite go to. Even Bunting's had chances tonight, and he's been beaten 4-0 by Van Gerwen, for Christ's sake. But I just think Luke creates that many chances. I think even Luke's B game at the moment matches what we've seen from Barney. And that's scary to say.
Barney's going to have to really, really roll back the years to come close to outscoring Luke. You know, Barney's biggest chance is like a bit like he said, to be fair, in his interview, is hitting his doubles and taking his chance on combination checkouts. It's coming with checkouts 90 plus, isn't it? And being able to put 3 darts together. That's his biggest chance. And if he can do that, he'll stay competitive. If it just comes down to who's scoring the most, then Luke will probably blow him away.
Yeah, 100%. And the final game of the night, what a match we have in store here, by the way. Luke Humphries takes on Joe Cullen. This should be played the way you want to see darts played.
Yeah, this is, I mean, if it wasn't for the game that preceded it, this is game of the day on pretty much any day of any World Championships, isn't it, really, at the minute? And it is only because of the sort of circus spectacle that's going on before it that this won't be billed as such. But a genuinely interesting game. And I'm going to go against the grain here. And I'm going to pick Joe Cullen for a couple of reasons. Is that, like, I know that Luke's got a lot in him. And he talks a lot about the way he keeps himself in shape and prepared for games. But I think that last game took so much out of him. Like, mentally and physically, I think it took a huge amount out of him. And he's carrying the weight of backwards and forwards between the tournament fame with MVG, arguably, probably again after tonight. But I think there's a big weight of expectation. I think he went absolutely through the mill with his game against Petrescu. I think Cullen, whilst we haven't seen amazing stuff from him, he's been really comfortable. We know he's got another gear. And I think that he's not frightened of Humphries. You know, we know Cullen's got that Premier League experience. He's got experience on the big stage. Granted, you know, he'd probably not seen him go too deep in, at the Palace World Championships. But yeah, I think Cullen comes through it. I'll go 4-3. It will be tight, but I'm going to pick Joe.
I don't want to go all Nigel Farage here and say, you laughed at me. But when I said Luke Humphries needed to lose in Minehead in order to go on and win the World Championships, I think the performances we've seen so far back that up. He wouldn't have come in here as clear favourite. All the other players wouldn't be going, Luke's won 3 of the last 4. It's Luke's to lose. It's Luke's to lose. And I think he has a completely different approach to the way he's going about it right now. Luke walked into this tournament in a lose-lose situation. He was favourite for the tournament. If he loses, he's out. Like, he has to go on and win it. or it's seen as a failure given the form he's in. That's a huge amount of pressure.
He's
And he's
also-
only just won his first major within the last 6 months, and everything else has been a free roll and carried on. He's been in fantastic form. He's been talking up. And at some point in his lifetime, it certainly looks like Luke Humphries has got the ability to go on and be a world champion. But under this much pressure, after the last 6 months that he's had, I'm just not sure. This is why I wasn't in the Premier League last year, by the way, because he couldn't quite handle that. I'm still not sure he's developed that side of his game enough for me. We saw a little bit of petulance early on against Ricardo. We saw his post-match press conference yesterday. He was quite 95 or 99% of the crowd were against me sort of thing. He's been in Euro Tour experiences similar to that before. You'd expect somebody of his relative experience, despite being under the age of 30, I guess, to be able to handle those sort of things. And I'm just not sure he's at the same level of maturity or mentality that we saw from Bully Boy when he went on to do the job last year. And I think if the slightest little thing goes wrong for Luke, I worry for him because it turns into a big thing because this is his world championships to lose.
Yeah, I agree completely. You know, every tournament he's won, he wasn't a favourite for. He wasn't a favourite going into the final. and I think it's very different this because and in some ways I think Luke Littler's done him a bit of a favour because a lot of the press that would have been Luke Humphries has been Luke. Luke Littler's took the heat off loads of other players. Make no mistake at all. There are loads of players that of the scrutiny. They're not under the scrutiny that they would be if it hadn't have been for Luke Littler. But I agree. And that's why Cullen is my pick tomorrow. I think that he put so much mentally and physically into that game with Petrescu. I think the interaction with the crowd probably wasn't ideal. Yeah, I mean, it's great and it's good. It's box office. He's jumping around the stage and flexing at the crowd and stuff. But I don't know how much of that is conducive to the mindset required to go on and win a world title. Yeah. I mean, Gerwen Price might prove that. Is the exception that proves the rule. But I just think, in those big game situations, the crowd's up. Crowd might not be against you. You might find the crowd's a bit 50-50 in this one. The crowd's not going to be pro Luke Humphries, I don't think, particularly. They'll just want to see a good darts match.
Well, walk-on-wise, he loses this battle completely. The crowd will be singing Oasis.
And they'll sing it through the first leg as well.
Yeah.
If you lose, I think if he loses the bull as well, if Luke loses the bull and Joe Cullen picks that first leg up and the crowd get behind him, it could be really tough for Luke Humphries this one. And I think it's a Cullen.
By contrast to that, Luke did come through an exceptionally tough game yesterday with whatever percentage you want to describe it as. There was certainly hostilities within the crowd that made it more difficult for Luke to perform yesterday in exactly the same round, in a very mirrored situation to Michael Smith going on to lift the Sid Waddell Trophy last year. And it's one of those things and patterns that sports people like to look for and go, well, this happened the last time this happened and blah, blah, blah. It's amazing how often those things match up, even to the point where both 3-1 down go on to win 4-3 sort of thing. You see that in the NFL. The last time that this team won this was happening, their quarterback did this, their linebacker did this sort of thing. And it's ridiculous how often those things then repeat themselves. But I'm still not sure that's conducive to Luke going on to lift the Sid Waddell right now. I need to see more from him. And if we get a reaction and we get a response and we get a performance from Luke Humphries that has seen him lift 3 of the last 4 major titles tomorrow, then I firmly believe he can go on and lift this trophy. But I have to see that tomorrow from him. Other than that, I just think he's too many bad performances in his sitting duck a little. I'm going to say we see it from Humphries. I'm going to say he wins this one, but I still think it's 4-3. I still think Cullen gets going.
Fair enough.
And with that, it is time to wrap up tonight's extra long show once again. Apologies that it is quite a long one, but we are getting to the nitty gritty of the tournament. I want to provide you with as much analysis and conversation as possible. The final day of action before New Year's Eve takes place tomorrow at Alexandra Palace with those 6 games that we've just previewed for you. The last 16 will wrap itself up and we will know our 8 quarter-finalists returning to Alexandra Palace on New Year's Day. A big thank you to everybody in the chat room who has joined us throughout tonight's show. Once again, if you're listening back as an audio only, we really do appreciate it. To Phil, who is at Alexandra Palace, once again, getting interviews. Remember, they're available in full on our YouTube channel. Go over there and check them out. And if you're not following us on socials, make sure you do Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X. We're even on Threads somewhere. Make sure you check us out. Dan, thank you very much for joining me. Paddy Power, thank you very much for all you have done for us throughout this tournament. We'll be back tomorrow night with the final Fallout Bar of 2023. That sounds weird to say. We'll see you all very, very soon.